Pay for your sister's wedding or don't bother showing up. That's what my mother said, not asked, said. Like it was already decided. Like I was already just a line item in someone else's budget. My name is Stella Vance. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was the family's best-kept secret. Not the favorite, not the golden one. I was the one who made things work quietly, the one who wired money at midnight and never mentioned it at breakfast. My sister was getting married in the spring. Big venue, outdoor ceremony, string lights, the kind of wedding you see on Pinterest boards with titles like, My Dream Day. She'd been planning it for 8 months. In that time, she called me 3 times. Once to ask for my credit card number, once to ask if I could cover the deposit just for now, and once, this past Sunday, to tell me that if I didn't fund the rest of the reception, I wasn't welcome at the ceremony. My parents didn't argue with her. That's the part I keep coming back to. I need to back up. Our family had a particular architecture. My sister was the beautiful one, the one who cried and got results. The one my parents called sensitive, when she was cruel, and passionate when she was selfish. I was the other one. The reliable one. The one who got a scholarship, moved out at 22, built something from nothing, and then, because I loved them, or because I was conditioned to, I'm still not completely sure which, kept funding theirs. It started small, the way these things always do. A car payment here. A grocery run there. When my father had a rough quarter with his business, I covered their mortgage for 3 months. When my sister dropped out of her second college program, I paid the tuition she owed so it wouldn't go to collections. None of it was ever spoken about plainly. It was always framed as temporary. Just this once. You know how tight things are. You're the one who has it together. I did have it together. That was true. But having it together didn't mean I had endless reserves. It meant I'd sacrifice the things that depleted yours. I didn't take vacations. I drove a 7-year-old car. I kept my apartment small and my expenses smaller. I was building a cushion for my future because I'd watched my parents build nothing and knew exactly where that road ended. None of them seemed to register that I wasn't rich. They saw a steady paycheck and extrapolated a bottomless account. My sister's name is Cassie. She's 27. She's been with her fiancé, now husband, technically, for 4 years. He's fine, quiet, goes along with things, the type who says, whatever you want, babe. So often it stops sounding like affection and starts sounding like surrender. I didn't dislike him. I just didn't understand why his wedding had become my financial obligation. The number my mother quoted me on Sunday was not small. She said it casually, like she was reading off a grocery list. We just need you to cover the rest of the reception, the venue balance, and the catering deposit. I asked her to repeat it. She did. I said nothing for a moment. Outside my window, someone was walking a dog. It was cold, the thin gray kind of cold that seeps in before spring actually arrives. I watched the dog stop and sniff a fence post and felt something shift in me, quiet and certain. That's not something I'm able to do, I said. My mother laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that means she thinks I'm being dramatic. Stella, don't do this right now. I'm not doing anything. I'm telling you I can't pay for a wedding reception. You have the money. I have savings. Those aren't the same thing. She was quiet for 3 seconds, which with my mother means she's shifting tactics. Then, Cassie is your sister. This is the most important day of her life. And I said, it's not my day. That was when she said it, the thing that made something inside me go very still. If you won't do this for your family, then maybe you shouldn't come at all. Cassie doesn't need that energy around her on her wedding day. I didn't respond. I said I'd call her back. I hung up. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that, not crying, not angry, just thinking, running through the years like a spreadsheet in my head. The numbers were very clear when I actually looked at them. My phone buzzed. Cassie. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times that night. My father sent one text. We raised you to be there for this family. I hope you remember that. I put the phone face down and started making a list. Here's what most people don't know about being the financially stable one in a family like mine. They don't just take your money. They take your signature. Over the years, without fully understanding what I was agreeing to, I'd co-signed on 2 things. A car loan for my sister, 3 years ago, when she couldn't qualify on her own, and a small business line of credit for my father, 18 months ago, when his bank required a co-signer with a stronger credit profile. I'd said yes to both because they were family and because I trusted that they'd handle their own obligations. I hadn't asked for updates. I hadn't followed up. I'd done what the family trained me to do, give without investigating. That night, I requested statements on both accounts. What I found was not good. My sister was 60 days behind on her car. My father's business credit line had been drawn nearly to its maximum, with minimum payments only, accruing interest at a rate that was going to take years to resolve. Both of these were tied to my name. Both of these were affecting my credit. Both of these had been happening while they were calling me asking for more. I sat with that information for a long time. I didn't yell. I didn't call them back in a panic. I sat, and I thought, and something inside me that had been loud for years, anxious, accommodating, perpetually braced for someone else's crisis, went completely quiet. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. Her name is Willa. I'd hired her 2 years earlier for a lease dispute and kept her on retainer out of a vague sense that being a woman alone in the world meant you should have someone in your corner who knew the law. That instinct turned out to be one of the better financial decisions I'd ever made. I explained the situation. She didn't react with shock, which told me she'd heard variations of this story before. We laid out a plan. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, the way anything real and lasting has to be. Over the next week, I made a series of quiet calls. I contacted my sister's auto lender and requested formal co-signer release paperwork. Given that she was behind on payments, that wasn't going to be simple, but I initiated the process and sent a certified letter documenting my request. I contacted my father's business bank and did the same. I also called my own bank and placed a flag on my credit accounts, a precautionary measure. Willa recommended in case anyone attempted to open new lines of credit in my name without my knowledge. I found 2 automatic transfers I'd set up years ago. One was a monthly contribution to a family emergency fund my mother had asked me to create, and one was a recurring payment toward my sister's phone plan that I'd apparently set up at 24 and never revisited. I canceled both. I documented the cancellations. I kept records of everything. I didn't tell anyone I was doing any of this. The wedding was 6 weeks out. My sister left a voicemail on Thursday that ran 4 minutes long. I listened to the whole thing. She cried. She said I was making her wedding about me. She said I was selfish and that she'd always known I thought I was better than the rest of them. She said she hoped I could live with myself. I replayed the part where she said she'd always known I thought I was better than them. I thought about the car loan. I thought about 60 days past due. I thought about her planning a reception she couldn't afford, calling it her dream, and then presenting the check to me like a bill at a restaurant I hadn't ordered from. I did not call her back. My father tried a different approach. He left one message, short, formal, the voice he used when he wanted to sound like authority. Stella, call me. This has gone on long enough. I didn't call. My mother texted every other day. Some days it was guilt. Your grandmother is heartbroken about this. Some days it was aggression. I didn't know where we went wrong with you. Some days it was bargaining. What if you just cover part of it? Even half. I read all of them. I replied to none. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother organized what she called a family lunch. I received the invitation as an afterthought, a text from my aunt, not from my mother directly. My aunt wrote, "Hope you'll come, honey. Would be good to have everyone together." I knew what it was. I recognized the architecture of it immediately. This was the gathering where I would be presented to the extended family as the problem, the one who was refusing to support her sister's wedding, the one who was making things hard. I would walk in, and the table would already know a version of the story. My mother would have written that version. I went anyway. The restaurant was one my mother liked because it was the kind of place that felt expensive without being expensive. Wood-paneled walls, cloth napkins, the kind of lighting that makes everyone look a little kinder than they actually are. When I arrived, the table was full. Aunts, an uncle, my grandmother. She was there, small and sharp-eyed, the only one in the family I'd ever truly trusted, to be honest. My mother smiled when I walked in, the kind of smile that means she's already won. I sat down. I ordered water. I listened to 20 minutes of conversation that carefully avoided anything real. wedding florists, the venue parking situation, whether the caterer would have a gluten-free option, the performance of normal. Then my father set his glass down and cleared his throat. "I think we should talk about the situation," he said. All heads turned toward me. "Stella has decided not to help with the wedding," my mother said to the table. Not to me, her voice carrying just enough sadness to sound reasonable. "We've tried to discuss it with her, but she hasn't been willing to engage." My aunt made a sound. My grandmother watched me. My sister looked at the tablecloth. "After everything this family has done for you," my father said, "I don't understand how you can sit there and refuse." The table was quiet. I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the cloth in front of me. Then I placed 3 printed pages next to it. Statements, account histories, dates, amounts, my name in the top corner of each one. "I'd like to share the full picture," I said. My voice was steady. I hadn't planned for it to be. It just was. I didn't read every number aloud. I slid the pages toward my grandmother, who was sitting closest and who I knew would actually look at them. She put on her glasses. The table waited. "This is the car loan," I said. "Currently 60 days past due. My name is on it. This is the business credit line. Drawn to 92%. My name is on that too." I paused. I didn't know either of them were in this condition until last week. The silence was different now. "I have been contributing money to this family for 7 years, I continued. "Not because I was asked politely, because the ask was always framed as emergency, as family, as what you do. I did it, and while I was doing it, these accounts were running behind. In my name." My sister said, "That's not relevant." "It's completely relevant," I said, "because you're asking me to fund a wedding reception, and I can't do that while there are debts attached to my credit that no one told me about." My mother said, "You're embarrassing us." I looked at her. "I'm telling the truth." My grandmother set the pages down. She looked at my mother for a long moment and then said nothing, which from her was more devastating than anything she could have said aloud. I picked up the papers. I put them back in my bag. I drank the rest of my water. "I love this family," I said quietly. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just done absorbing consequences that aren't mine." I paid for my water. I left before dessert. The parking lot was cold. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving anywhere, not because I was upset, but because I needed the moment to be real. I'd said true things in a room full of people, and nobody had been able to argue with the documents. That felt significant. The weeks that followed were loud and then abruptly quiet. Cassie didn't call after the lunch. My father sent one email, formal and distant, which I read and didn't answer. My mother cycled through 3 more rounds of guilt before going silent. The wedding happened. I wasn't there. I know this because I saw a photo on my aunt's social media page 2 days later. The family gathered outside the venue, everyone dressed up, everyone smiling for the camera in that particular way. That means they're working at it. My sister in white. My parents flanking her. A frozen moment that didn't tell you anything about the months that came before it. I looked at it once. Then I put my phone down and went back to what I was doing, which was packing for a trip I'd booked 3 months earlier and never canceled. A week in New Mexico, hiking and nothing else. I'd been wanting to go for 4 years. I'd kept postponing it because there was always some family crisis that needed my presence, my money, my attention. There wasn't one anymore. The trip was good. Better than I'd expected. I came back with a different relationship to quiet, not afraid of it, not trying to fill it, just letting it sit there like furniture. My apartment felt like mine in a way it hadn't in years. I kept the lights low and cooked actual meals and slept 8 hours without my phone charging next to my bed. 3 months passed. The credit issues were slow to resolve but moving in the right direction. Willa was handling the co-signer release on the car loan. The process required my sister to refinance in her own name, which, after several letters and one very tense phone call between Willa and my sister's loan officer, she finally began. My father's business line was more complicated, but I'd been formally removed from liability on 2 of the 3 attached accounts, and the third was in process. My credit score, which had dropped 11 points while I wasn't paying attention, started climbing back. I ran into my grandmother in April, not by arrangement, just at the pharmacy near her apartment. She was smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were the same, direct and a little amused. Like she found the whole business of being human somewhat ridiculous. She took my hands and held them. "You did the right thing," she said. I said, "I don't know if it was right, it was just the only thing I could do." She shook her head. "You were carrying too much. You would have collapsed eventually. At least this way you chose the timing." We stood there for a moment on the sidewalk. A bus went past. Someone behind us was arguing on a phone. "Your mother is not a bad person," my grandmother said finally. "But she learned a long time ago that you would hold things together, so she never had to." She paused. "That wasn't fair to you?" I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. "Is she okay?" I asked. "Are they managing?" My grandmother gave me a look that said she understood exactly what I was asking, which was not just whether they were financially fine, but whether I had caused a damage that I couldn't live with. "They're figuring it out," she said, "as they should have been doing for years." I called Cassie in June, not to apologize and not to relitigate anything. I'd been thinking about what my grandmother said, that people who've been enabled for a long time don't learn they can stand on their own until they're given no alternative. I didn't know if Cassie and I would ever have a real relationship, but I didn't want silence to be the permanent answer just because it was the easiest one. She picked up on the second ring. She was quiet for a moment after she heard my voice. Then she said, "I didn't think you'd call." "I almost didn't," I said. "We didn't fix anything on that phone call. We didn't hash out the loan or the wedding or the years of tilted give and take. We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things. Her new apartment, a TV show we'd both apparently been watching, a bakery near her job that she said had good pie. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in years. Possibly ever. When she said goodbye, she paused, and then she said, "I didn't know about the accounts, the ones in your name. I want you to know that." I thought about whether I believed her. I still don't know. But I said, "Okay," and I meant it as much as I could. What they lost wasn't my checkbook. It was the assumption, deep, comfortable, unexamined, that there would always be someone to catch them, that the net would always be there, stretched and waiting, regardless of what they dropped into it. What I got back was harder to name. Not freedom exactly, because I'd technically always been free to say no. More like accuracy. My life started matching what I actually wanted instead of what was expected of me. My savings grew. My sleep got better. I stopped bracing for the next emergency that would reroute my plans. The last thing I did, the last loose thread, was close the family emergency fund account. The one my mother had asked me to open 8 years ago. The one she'd never contributed to, and I'd funded alone. I transferred the balance to my own account. I didn't tell anyone. The notification came through at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I read it. Then I poured a glass of wine, turned on something quiet on the television, and sat with the specific, ordinary feeling of my money being exactly where it was supposed to be. I wasn't the ATM they'd built their habits around. I wasn't the backup plan they'd confused with a person. I was 31 years old. I was finally, quietly, entirely myself. And it turned out that was enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long, not why I finally stopped. That part makes sense to me now. But why I kept going for 7 years, writing checks and signing documents, and quietly rerouting my own life around theirs. I think the honest answer is that I confused love with usefulness. I thought being needed was the same as being valued. It took a very long time to understand those are not the same thing, and that confusing them is how you end up 31 years old, financially exposed, and standing in a parking lot after a family lunch wondering why telling the truth felt so much harder than it should have. What I know now is that actions compound, not in a mystical sense. I just mean that the practical reality of choices, made consistently over time, builds a structure you eventually have to live inside. Every time I wired money without asking questions, I taught my family that questions weren't required. Every time I co-signed without following up, I told them their obligations were also mine. Every time I rearranged my life around their emergencies, I confirmed that my life was the more rearrangeable one. I didn't do any of that consciously. But intent doesn't change outcome. The structure got built regardless. And on their side, the same compounding happened in reverse. My sister didn't wake up one day deciding to be careless with money she'd borrowed in my name. She just never had to face the consequence of being careless because I was there absorbing it. My parents didn't sit down and plan to use me. They just learned, gradually and comfortably, that the safety net existed and would hold. When systems work, people stop questioning them. That's not evil, that's just how humans are built. What changed things wasn't my anger. I was angry for years and it didn't change anything because I kept the anger private and kept the transfers going. What changed things was clarity, seeing the actual numbers on those account statements. My name at the top, the balances, the dates, made the situation undeniable in a way that feelings never quite managed to. Feelings can be talked out of. Documents cannot. I think about Cassie sometimes and what it cost her to refinance that car in her own name. Not in a gloating way, more like, I wonder if that was the first time in her adult life that a financial consequence landed on her directly and stayed there. I wonder what she learned from that. I hope something useful. I genuinely do. The thing I want to say, if any of it matters beyond my own story, is this. Integrity isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's mostly just a series of quiet, inconvenient decisions that accumulate into a life you can actually stand behind. I didn't give a speech. I didn't blow anything up. I made phone calls, kept records, and stopped signing my name to things I hadn't agreed to. That's it. That was the whole revolution. Grandma told me I would have collapsed eventually. She was right. The only question was whether I'd choose the timing or have it chosen for me. I chose. That, more than anything else, is what I want to remember about this.